Hello everyone and welcome to a guide overview of Astragoth Ironhand of the Chaos Dwarfs. I played through the initial turns and got a sense for the faction. These are my conclusions on how they play, strengths and weaknesses. As always, this is not an in-depth guide or overview, but it should help you out making your own decisions. So without further ado, let's play with Astragoth Ironhand. So for your short victory condition, you have to destroy the Lemian Sisterhood, very close by, the vampires, and Kraka Drak, which is quite far away. They do tend to get killed earlier on, so maybe you have your work cut out for you. You also need to occupy, loot, raise, or sack 35 different settlements. Now, achieving this, it's a very interesting reward. Major relic missions become available. So in the Realms of Chaos, there's a relic type of mechanic. Over here it isn't, but it will become available in the form of missions for the after you conclude the short victory. Then your workload requirement for raw materials and for all provinces is minus 50%, and the raw materials consumed per turn by buildings is also minus 15%. So all of this a little bit later in the mechanics, but it's a very good campaign victory basically idea, because it falls into the type of faction that we're playing, instead of being just a generic reward basically, which I really love. Now, it's a rather short victory. The reward is very good and thematic. You'll be able to have a much easier time going into the long campaign victory. Now this, you need to achieve the short victory conditions, occupy, loot, raise or sack 80 different settlements, and hold the settlement of Zanagrund. This one starts, by the way, it's not a bug, many people confuse that, but it starts being a tier 5 settlement, by the way. You also need to destroy the factions of Karas Karak, so basically this is Thorgrim that you need to take out, Karak Kadrin, you need to take out Ungrim, and you also need to take out Grimgor on the other side. So this is rather lengthy already, because you need to expand in both locations, which is a problem, but still doable. Basically the most difficult part of this is probably to occupy, loot, raise or sack 80 different settlements. Now, the reward, again, very good. 3 unique items, all really good to ensure that your characters have a much easier time on the battlefield, and also give good buffs to their armies. So, as you can see here, missile strength for missile infantry, war machine, artillery units. So pop this one on one of your main armies using mainly missile units and watch them wreck everything. And you also have the Hammer of Smeeder. So yeah, basically the idea here is you get all these ones, and yeah, your continuation to domination is just that much easier. Now, let's talk about the High Priest of Shut, Mr. Astragoth Ironhand. So he gets quite decent buffs, it may not look like, but control +2 to all provinces, it's always helpful. Research rate +10%, it's always cool, and especially for the Chaos Dwarfs. And the Conclave influence gained from all sources +10%, that actually helps in one of the mechanics. So even though it may not seem like it, it's already cool, especially with his, if you add in his already, his army benefits. It's a quite cool set of buffs that he has. It's really good. It's always positive, which is what I love about it. And then in the end we reach the climax. Everything is suitable. This is what we love for domination. Honestly, it's one of the mechanics that although it's cool, it's thematic, it's so much hindering for anyone that tries to control the map, that I love seeing more factions that are just thematically going into the domination, which this one goes. So a very nice faction to try and win full map completion, or at least world domination with. So your starting province is a 3-settlement province, and you do start with the capital, which is always nice. Now, it's a decent location to have everything that you need for the early game, really. It's quite close by, so it's very defensible as well, but it will be a problem because you need both economy-wise and military-wise, given the number of buildings that you need for your full military, and unique buildings at your capital, which are a lot. Basically, I can show them already. You'll likely need to get at least a second or third even province to get all of your military going and your economy going. Oh, hey, Alamaso going there. Now, typical expansion will go into the southern area. For the most part, you'll be expanding southwards until most likely you even reach the sea down there. It's really easy to actually go over here, and at one point you'll have to decide if you do go into these mountains or these mountains. I guess the main issue here is who you want to take out first, if you want to take out Grimgor first or if you want to take out the dwarfs. It's up to you. For the northern part you won't have too much trouble for the most part, because Norska is friendly towards you, Chaos is friendly towards you. So yeah, it's definitely a one-way direction campaign for the most part, and then you have to choose whether go east or west. So in terms of diplomacy, you are Chaos aligned. So Norska, other Chaos factions, even the monogods will be welcoming to your faction, probably become allies at one point. You're also in the weird situation that you're hated by both evil aligned factions and ordered aligned almost as much. You know, typically sometimes the evil factions still like, you know, some of the Chaos factions, but in this case, look at that aversion, -100. Of course the greenskins hate you, but it's not like it improves too much with other factions. True, the Skaven, as you can see, and even the Ogres, they don't have too much aversion, but it may be difficult to find anything, you know, any viable alternatives here for you. Still, if you manage, I would say that the best outpost would be, not that the Chaos Dwarfs actually need anything, it's one of the factions that I've found more difficult to do this, but if you manage, some Skaven artillery and high range weaponry are always nice, Norska for their single entity monsters, even for their monsters infantry, and Slanesh, it's an idea just basically because what you lack for the most is speed. So if you do manage to get, you know, friends with some Slanesh faction, try to ensure that they survive so that you can get at least a couple of units from their outposts. That would be a good idea in itself for a campaign, you know, like a thematic campaign. Let me help out some Slanesh faction and try to get their fast units. So in terms of the mechanics, there are a lot of them, bear with me. So let's start with the unique settlements. You have three types: towers, which you can only build in capitals, outposts, and factories. Basically they're all devoted mostly for one specific type, so as in the towers are more into the military, the outposts are more into producing raw materials, and the factories more into linked to the armament production. That's typically the idea here. Now, every different type of settlement, of course, then has their own unique building tree, as you can see here. More on that later on, but basically they all have different unique settlement building trees that you should familiarize yourself with. Now, labor economy, basically by fighting, by gaining laborers via battles, you can then put them to work, basically, in your settlement. And, of course, this will imply that they are working at maximum efficiency, so you always have a workload to check and a labor to check. If you need more laborers, well, have some more battles, try to get some more laborers so that you can get all of this always in the efficiency. And this means that you will get an output of raw materials. Let's talk about the currencies then now. Currencies, you have raw materials, so basically, you need to generate these from your mines, okay, which are located in your outposts, okay, as you can see here. Sorry, not this one. Here. You can acquire the raw materials. It requires workload, so basically the more mines that you have, the more laborers you'll need to put to work, of course, you know, to be efficient. And in you'll have then your armaments, because these ones are assembled via the raw materials. That's mainly what you need it for. So the raw materials will be diminished there and constructed into armaments. All of these have specific uses. Finally, you have conclave influence. You can gain these basically by settlement buildings, and they are linked to the mechanic called the Tower of the Tsar. Now, before I move into that, there's an additional way that you have to spend your raw materials, which is precisely in the costs. Sometimes buildings cost gold, but sometimes they will cost other stuff than gold. Here, let's go into the tower so that I can show you. For instance, this building costs raw materials. This building costs armaments, so you'll have to be on the lookout of what you need in order to expand or to build that specific building and to improve. In addition, you do not have growth. Instead of growth, what you have is that you need these specific raw materials to construct it. That's basically how it works. Adding to this, and before we go into anything further, you can also rush construction. You can basically sacrifice some laborers in order to finish up a construction that you completely need, so that you don't have to wait for it. Of course, by all means, it does cost some laborers. Now, let's talk about the other mechanics. Let's start with the Tower of the Tsar, or the Tower of Tsar. Basically, this allows you to use those conclave influence points to gain seats. You can choose this one, for instance, and it will give you it will cost you 75 influence to claim this seat. Now, any other Chaos Dwarf faction can also claim these seats, and they can even try to take over yours. So that is kind of like an inner struggle for who gets the best seats in the tower. Now, once one specific district is completed, it will give these specific buffs to every Chaos Dwarf faction. And then, of course, after a couple of these are unlocked, you'll go over to the tier 2, to the tier 3 district, and finally to the tier 4 district. Over here, all that you can do is to confederate your friendly Chaos Dwarfs. So this is the confederation mechanic basically for the Chaos Dwarfs. It's really nice. I like that you get to use this to improve overall how your faction works, and then of course to have this ultimate goal of confederating your other Chaos Dwarf factions. Now, let's talk about the Hell Forge. So the Chaos Dwarfs, they have what is called unit caps. So for your most advanced factions, units, you'll have to spend armament in order to gain some more the possibility of recruiting some more units of the specific type. So for instance, I will need 250 to increase the cap for the Great Taurus, for instance. And the more that this increases in terms of the caps that you have unlocked, the more you can actually give them buffs in the manufactory. So for instance, let me show you the melee infantry now. I can actually give them frenzy now, and it will cost an upkeep of armaments. So you can see how the armaments will always be necessary, and because of the armaments being necessary to improve your units, you'll always and to gain more to have more unit caps basically, so that you can increase the effectiveness of your overall army with better units. Then you'll need laborers, you need raw materials, so a steady income of all of that should be important. So yeah, it's one of the most interesting faction mechanics for true. Yeah. Now, speaking of the last mechanic, actually not yet last, let me I was forgetting about this. You also have labor actions, so you can gain conclave influence by spending labor, or you can gain some treasury by spending labor, or you can gain some control by, guess what, spending labor. So this is also a good idea, so that you can, you know, have some specific conclave influence, or some gold if you're in the rush, or some control at the expense of the poor laborers. Well, they're not poor, they're laborers, that's what they're for. Finally, the last one that I wanted to speak of is the military convoys. This is similar to the Canthay caravans. So you send out a convoy to exchange one currency for the other. So like, you give gold in order to, so you're going to lose gold in order to gain laborers. This is the one that I have. Of course, it takes time before they reach it, so you're not going to gain those laborers until quite some time has passed. But so you always need to check and predict what you're going to be in need before proceeding. Okay, so as the convoy moves, there will also be events that you'll need to go for, and you'll be able to increase the army panel with some specific units. It's really lots of fun. You'll need to decide the outcome of those events. You may have to fight your way out of. It's really cool. really a nice addition to the overall Chaos Dwarfs. It adds a specific situation, which is that you'll naturally scout other armies and other factions. So the Chaos Dwarfs actually, you will notice that you will find out most of the enemy factions that are out there just because of the supply convoy idea. And wow, yeah, that's it. There were a lot of them. So, in terms of province edicts, we have the Masterful Architect, so rush construction labor cost minus 10%, and construction cost minus 10% for all buildings. Always useful, it's really cool. Then we have the recruitment cost minus 20%, and recruit rank plus 2 to armies in province. So, of course, if you're recruiting, pop this one up, ensure that your units are already better and that you don't spend too much for them. Then we have income from refinery buildings and armaments output. So as you can see, this is perfect when you have lots of factories in a province, so you can actually specialize if you wish. Then we have control and a reduced chance of a plague spreading. This is always nice when fighting any plague driven armies such as Nurgle. Okay, more important, let's say, in the Realms of Chaos campaign than here, but still you shouldn't neglect it, especially because plagues, you know, they're plagues. Everyone hates them. So yeah, that's up in terms of the edicts. In terms of the army stances, let me just move him away to show you. Basically, you do have the typical ones, let's say, from the dwarves. So you have underway. Of course, it's awesome. You can, it allows fast travel between difficult terrain. It allows you some tactical advantages. It's really great. Just be sure that you're not intercepted, or make sure that you can be intercepted and survive, of course, because otherwise, of course, you lose the army. So be sure to remember that. Now, it has encamp to enable replenishment and access to global recruitment pool, also to be immune to most attrition, and can pay at the cost of 50% movement. It's basically how it works all the time. Now, raid does have an interesting effect that it gains labor based on the strength of the army. So a very strong army will gain you more labor, but you don't need to gain too much. You know, even an army such as that you're seeing here, quite just a basic stack of units will gain you some labor. So yeah, it may be an important idea here. And then we have ambush, 25% cost, and of course for smudge for 50%. It's a very good choices overall. It allows strategic options with the underway, always ensuring good replenishment when necessary. Yeah, a very solid choice in terms of both edicts and army stances. Now, you have, in terms of buildings, like I said, 3 types of settlements. Let's start with the tower settlements. These are only for your capital, the province's capital buildings. Of course, the one that you start off has some specific special buildings, such as the drill assembly line that you can see here, getting some income, some raw materials. It does cost some workload, and even some armaments per turn. So really cool, really great. You also get the allotment of the Bull Center tower ranks for all provinces, and the hero recruitment rank and upkeep. It's really cool for you to have this building as when possible, of course. Note that it is costly in terms of gold, of course, but yeah, it should come as soon as possible. In terms of the iron here that you have, note that there are some specific differences between the resource. You always should aim to check the resources, what they do, okay? Because for instance, this one does produce armaments if you have 300 raw materials available, and some chaos undivided corruption. So all of these do provide a little bit difference. So make sure that you notice these so that you can maximize their output. Now, basic and advanced military, note that only in the towers you can reach the highest ones. Of course, this is fairly typical. Let's say you need 5 buildings for full military, really. And note that this one also provides you some Chaos Dwarf Warriors and Chaos Dwarfs, but this is the typical building that you would get. Now, a good thing that I'll have to mention is how every single hero is actually on tier 2 building, which is excellent. It's really easy to access most of your heroes, and even on your tier 3 you already have really good units, such as the Bull Center renders with great weapons. This is crazy. This is like Demigryph compared units, You already have Infernal Guards, so, these would definitely be a tier 4, but they're tier 3. So at tier 3, you already have quite good units, to be honest. Now, speaking of infrastructure, you have a income in building. It's pretty straightforward. Sorry, I forgot about this. So you have a Lord recruit rank, a Hero recruit rank, and a Casualty replenishment rate for your... So of course the other ones are faction wide, and the Casualty replenishment rate plus 10%. It's always nice. Now you have a control to all adjacent provinces and control to this province. So sometimes just one of these is enough if you have any issues, especially very hard or legendary difficulty. These can come in handy, and they also give you movement range, which is honestly excellent. I'll explain why. Sometimes you have, you're always building up your military, at least if you're like me, on your initial province, and then they have to move all the way. So having a little bit of a buff, of movement range, it can help. And it helps if you're under attack in the province, for instance, if you only move into one direction in the campaign map. So don't neglect this one. At least one building would be nice, I guess. Of course, you can just go to tier 3 and then forget about it or something like that. It depends on you. Now, this Grand Furnace gives you raw materials consumption per turn by buildings to minus 50%. So this is a cool building to have to ensure that you don't have to spend too many raw materials, thus you don't need so many laborers, etc. You also have a Conclave gained per turn plus 10. This is really nice. It's a really cool building. If it was just the plus 10 per turn, it would really be cool. Imagine with the rest. So Winds of Magic power reserve capacity plus 3 to all armies, diplomatic relations with Chaos Dwarfs, and recruit rank for bull centers. So if you have the bull center producing building, by all means get this one to get even more recruit ranks. If you add that just with the edict, you already have plus 5. So can you imagine? Now, defensive, basically you then have, of course, your defensive buildings for better garrisons, etc. That's the sort of stuff. And some army abilities as well for all armies in local and adjacent units, regions as well. So these may be in order for you. But yeah, that's with the towers. Let's go with the outposts. These are mainly required for the main source of raw materials. They will give you conclave influence there and some income, but then you'll need this one to produce raw materials. 400 per turn, as you can see there, with a workload of plus 500, so you'll always need 500 laborers for 400 raw materials. And then it does provide you some income here. Okay, especially income from post-battle loot. That's interesting. And you also have campaign line of sight and control in case you're having some issues. Note that you can only produce hobgoblin units on the outposts. Still, they're decent. Hobgoblin units, you can do quite some decent stuff with them, especially in the early to mid game, so don't neglect those. Yeah, they're fine. Now, you also have in the factory, it's kind of like the middle of the way, because you do have some 3 basic buildings, so you can recruit, imagine, infernal guards in the factories, and you also have, the Death Shriek or the Hell Cannon, or even, the Magnum Cannon and the Skullcracker and other demons. So yeah, these are all good choices. But of course, mainly the factories are about producing the. They do get influence here, some income, but they're mainly about producing armaments at the cost of raw materials. So that's the main issue. Okay, you can generate income as well at the cost of raw materials, but remember that, like I'm doing here, if I'm doing both of these buildings, that implies that I'm going to lose a lot of raw materials, for some armaments and then for some income. So you have to spread that out a little bit. Then you also have finally a raw materials output plus 30% in the local province. This is the reason why many people defend that you should actually always have, at least in the 3 and 4 settlement provinces, always have at least one factory, just to build up this building. That's the next one that I'm going to build in this settlement here, to increase the raw materials output, because that's really great. You don't spend too many raw materials, 250 and then 1,500, in order to increase the raw materials output of the whole province, which is always excellent. Now, special note that you can have the Infernal Castellan recruited as well and increased their capacity in the factories. So this is also important to have another hero. It's really cool to ensure that, for instance, maybe you don't need this building immediately in your in your main province, so you can build it in the factories and benefit from it. Okay. Now, let's talk about research. Research is very interesting. So, it is divided in industry, sorcery, and military, doing exactly what it means. Industry will improve basically how your economy works. Okay, some experience in Lord Recruit here for the convoys, etc. Some convoy stuff, some defensive supplies here, some melee defense when under siege. some chance of a convoy ambush. You can see here with more or less workload requirement for raw materials minus 10% and labor gain for all armies. So yeah, basically anything that can improve your economy is here. Now, sorcery, it's more about specific campaign buffs, and you also have specific ideas for your spells. So you can see here -1 for Spirit Leech, -1 for Burning Wrath in terms of cost of Winds of Magic, so that's cool. You also have diplomatic relations with specific factions such as the Demons of Chaos. Over here you will have it with Wars of Chaos, Beastmen and Norsca. So yeah, all of this implies that you should aim for this for more of a campaign style idea with still some implications in the magic of your armies. And finally, military, it's all about the military, of course. So you can give less upkeep to units, more stats. They do improve quite a bit. And the good thing is that, you know, sorry about that. The good thing is that you will improve them precisely when you need them. You'll have these units in the beginning, you'll have these ones in the beginning, so yeah, just improve them immediately and you can benefit from the technology as you progress into better units. And then you'll have this for Living Metal, for Bull Center Renders, about the time that you will have per center renders. So yeah, that's the sort of idea. Don't neglect this, they do get some mighty buffs, by the way, so ensure that you can you know, at least progressively go along with the military line here of technology, because it's really cool. Yeah, definitely in terms of research, one of the best tech trees, so don't neglect it. It's really cool, really important. You can either beeline specific ones, or you can just go forth with the campaign with the specific ones that you need at the time. Now, as always, we have our Lord-specific skills, you know, some casting or melee line. We have the red line for army, of course, and the blue line for campaign. Starting with the blue line, you do have Logistician, so for more casualty replenishment rate and less attrition casualty suffered, which is always excellent. However, given how Chaos Dwarfs have no issues with climate, it may appear a little bit redundant. Now, you also have Tyrant for an increase in post-battle loot and labor gain post-battle. This is important, especially for it's quite thematic and helpful for the campaign overall, so don't neglect this. It may help you out in your labor needs in the early game, at least. And still, it's quite effective. In terms of red line, it's quite good. It grants good buffs and they complement some of the weaknesses. For instance, giving melee attack for the melee infantry units, which is one of the weaknesses, it gets corrected here. So it is still quite expensive to field many different unit types, okay? So be wary of that if you wish to buff all of your units, for instance, because they are mainly divided. All missile units here, all of your artillery here, all of your cavalry here, all of your monsters here. So it does include the skull cracker there, but still, as you can see, it does help, of course, that ensure that you can use this early and still benefit from the upgraded units later on from that choice, which is a cool, nifty idea. And in terms of your hero's skills, so basically they have some choices, okay? For instance, such as the Bull Center here, he can become an effective agent if you wish. He can be a very menacing, charging monster around with more mass, more charge bonus, in instance. I've chosen with the Temple Guardian to give him the passive ability of the Guardian, of course, to help, because that's the function that I want him to perform. But yeah, you can choose different ones. So every single different hero will have some differences, of course. A special note to Gorgeous Backstabber, which, because of his abilities, he can improve Hobgoblin armies by a mile. Any army that you put this guy in, if you buff all of them for the red line skill, basically he has a red line skill for them. So by all means, he will improve them so much that you'll be able to get a full army just of Hobgoblins, which I definitely recommend. Of course, you can just use this hero as an assassin in your army, but by all means, it's always nice to have a hero that can, you know, by itself make you have a different army composition, which is what I wanted to state here. Now here are all of the red line skills and the units that they cover. So basically they have all of their unit types have amazing success in battle. So you can field quite a variety of different armies, either focus on artillery or their ranged units, or combinations of both their melee powerhouses and you know their They're monsters as well, so it's quite mostly due to personal flavor, whatever you prefer to use. Now, in terms of Astragoth, he does have some ward save, 50% for bold center render units, which is, you shouldn't neglect this. That's a lot. 15% ward save. That's 15% less damage from every source. So yeah, that's definitely a good buff. Followed with more armor piercing and even reduced upkeep for them. You can see why, of course, most of the compositions that I have for him are around those bowl center units. So this first one is more of a basic composition with some front lines, some missile troops, some bowl centers. As always with these compositions, you can vary them decently. This is just some ideas here. You can vary with the heroes that you'll have here, the amount of heroes. Maybe you want 4 heroes, maybe you want 5 heroes, maybe you want none. It's really up to you. What I aim to here is to explain that this composition, for instance, costs 15 skill points in the red line to buff entirely. This one the same, this one 14 only. This is more of a based on artillery, since you may like that choice, you know, with just some infantry here. This is more of a straight up melee focused one with no range whatsoever. Well, basically these guys do have some range, but yeah, this is more for, let's say, playing him on an ambush status or more on an underway idea, you know, that sort of idea if you wish. Okay, then we have some specific generalized armies here with some chaos blunderbusses here and some artillery without cavalry here. This is more a stationary dwarf style army. This is more of the opposite, you know, so from standard infantry front line with some missiles and some cavalry support. This one focuses more on the magical creatures here and the cavalry as well, alongside with some infantry. This has more of everything, which you will notice on the unit types that you need quite some skills to develop there. And then we have some sweeper armies. These are always nice to have, you know, some, because of how it works in terms of the unit caps system. It will incentive you to have some spare armies that use none of it. So for instance, hobgoblin armies, by all means, they'll surprise you, especially in the late game. As you've seen, if you haven't seen the Chaos Dwarf army roster that I've set, you can check that out. I put all the red line skills before and after, so you can make your decision there. And it is also very not costly a lot in terms of redline skills, so you may use that, or you may use just some Chaos Dwarf warriors that they're really good, especially even in the late game. They can hold on. So all of these ideas are, of course, for your liking. This is what I would do in my own armies, but by all means you can differentiate and vary. That's the beauty actually of the Chaos Dwarfs. They can do anything really. So, Astragoth, he has a nice position to expand into the south, without too many threats from the north at all, because of how this works with Norska, with Warriors of Chaos over there. Yeah, he'll likely have mostly enemies focused on this area here. Their economy and mechanics are impeccable in doing one thing. It actually rewards you so much for your decision making. I'm loving this new approach regarding CA, where they actually reward you a lot for every decision that you make on the campaign map and on the battlefield even. So it is a great campaign to see the results of that decision making, and you'll have plenty of opportunities to test every single weapon in your arsenal to enjoy them to the fullest. Now, speaking of the army, it consists of strong holding infantry, great missiles and artillery, great cavalry, good monstrous infantry, great single entities and flyers, lacks some speeds, and it does require some time to build up. They are more of a middle to late game powerhouse really, but still don't neglect the initial armies. They can do what is necessary, but still, yeah, it may require some time to build up. Now, replenishment is great, no issues with climate, lords have good access to replenishment, although it does lack a hero with it. It's still not something really important for the Chaos Dwarfs, given how the climate works. Now, I believe now it is time to then follow Hashut with Astragoth Ironhand.